And finally, here we are. Hello, everyone. Thanks for your patience. Bonjour tout le monde. Welcome to Concordia University's fourth space. Thank you so much for joining us for Fire and Light, the second in the series of conversations that brings together artists to discuss their creative practices in performance, sculpture, bioart, video, social practice, and visual art, as well as their crucial work as producers of major international festivals, conferences, and performances. To help situate you, we are streaming to YouTube live from Fourth Space, which is located on unceded Indigenous lands here in Jarry, Montreal. And as caretakers for the lands and waters we are meeting on today, we'd like to extend our gratitude to the Kanyankahawga Nation for their teachings about the earth and our relations. If you're new to Fourth Space, online or in person, welcome. So glad you could join us. What do we do here? Well, we work with our university community to mobilize and exchange knowledge by co-creating daily activities such as today's. So we'd like to express our thanks and gratitude to our colleague, Megan Mo Batix, for inviting in today's special guest who will be introduced shortly. Before passing it over to Mo, I'll just say, if you're in the space with us and you have any questions or comments for our guests, please just raise a hand. We'll get one of these microphones to you so that folks on Zoom can hear you. And if you're joining us virtually, you're more than welcome to raise a virtual hand and unmute yourself. Otherwise, the chat is, of course, activated. All right, that's it for me. Over to you, Mo. Welcome.
Thanks so much. I really greatly appreciate the staff and everyone here at Fourth Space, and also the Center for Interdisciplinary Studies in Society and Culture, as well as the Concordia University Theater Department, who are co-sponsors of this series of events. Feel really lucky to be able to nab really professional, talented people as they pass through and near Montreal. And put them in conversation with phenomenal Concordia faculty. Really grateful for that. To my right, I have Alice, Jarry, and Rasa Smite. And what we're going to do is start off with a brief introduction to their practices from both of them. So they're each going to speak for about 10 minutes. And then I'm going to prompt them to talk amongst themselves so we can see how their various professional practices kind of unfold in multiple fields and parameters, and also potential intersections with performance. And then we will be doing that for about 40 minutes, and then we'll have space for about half an hour of questions from both the live and virtual audiences. So that's what we've got in store for you guys today. I'm very excited. And just as a plug in this series, we've already had Beck Berger, who is the artistic director of the Holmanovas International Theater Festival, which is based in Riga, Latvia, and they were in conversation with VK Preston of Concordia University History Renown. And then April 3rd coming up, we have Margo Zalite, who is an opera director and a director of the Favorton Festival in Germany. And they will be in conversation with music faculty, Eldad, fancy pants. No, Eldad, the current music chair. So keep an eye out for that. April 3rd is our next and last event in this series. So without further ado, I think I'm going to start by introducing Alice, and then they're going to discuss their work for a little bit. So Alice Jarry is an artist, researcher, and educator who specializes in site-specific responsive works, socio-environmental design, digital arts, tangible media, and community-oriented projects. Her research brings concerns about sustainability, aesthetics, and politics to bear critically upon materiality, material production, and contemporary matters of concern regarding urban communities and infrastructures. With matter inseparable from both form and practice, her installation works examine how materiality, engaged in constant processes of transformation and circulation with site, technology, and communities, can provoke the emergence of adapted forms and resilient socio-environmental relations. She is a member of COP's International Research Consortium on the Governance and Management of Large Infrastructure Projects, Hexagram, international network dedicated to research creation in media arts, design, technology, and digital culture, the Living Architecture Systems Group at U Waterloo, and the Topological Media Lab at U Concordia. So take it away, Alice. Excited to hear more about your fascinating practice.
Thank you, Megan. Just make sure to share this with sound. 1 second. Do we have feedback? Sound is off. Okay, should be good. Okay, so well, hi everyone. Thanks for your presence this afternoon. I'm honored to be in conversation with Rasa. Thank you, Megan, for the organization. Thank you to Ford Space, everyone, for the invitation. So here, you already mentioned it in the introduction, but something that is at the core of my research and practice is the question of waste and what we do with materials that are at the end of their life cycles. So the video that you see here comes from a piece entitled Dust Agitator, which looks at one fine particle exhausted material that's produced by the recycling industry in Quebec, most importantly by glass. And beyond its transformation into post-consumer product use in infrastructure in the construction industry, my art practice looks at what we can do with those leftover materials and those unloved materials. So the concept of residue as something that's been excluded or lost from the process history of a material, technological, or social system is really at the core of my research and practice. So basically, this is the fine glass particles that were in the previous video. So residue is both the result of human activity and at the same time everything that we wish to exclude from it. And this process of refinement, loss, exclusion troubles the notion of matter and question what kind of practice we enable as artists and designers. So I will just briefly situate my research platform. Okay. So the Kirk and Critical Materials and Materiality is my research chair. And we look at cultural, social, environmental, technological issues linking materiality and cultural production. So the research intersects with practices in material science, in environmental science, to look at how to develop practical, theoretical, aesthetic, and methodological knowledge around materials that are sustainable and resilient for the built environment and our ecosystems. So basically, I divide my research and my practice in three streams, all having to do with materials. One is about membranes and ecological milieu. The other one is about art science collaboration and active smart materials. And the other one is about materiality of the city. Basically, my lab, the BioLab, is a platform for practical exploration and conceptual exploration around the technosphere and how it impacts the changing status of life on the planet. And these are other collaboration platforms, but we can discuss it after when we discuss. So basically membranes, we have a project on air filtration. When I say we, it's me and my research group. We always work collectively. So basically we look at how air particles, which are residues from the built environment and that are biological, geological, and also anthropogenic materials unfold at different scales and what kind of social environmental problematic they enable. So we ask the question how to make the invisible tangible. How do we make air material? So for this, we explore issues of air quality and we look at one specific Montreal infrastructure, the Metropolitan Expressway, and its intimate bonds to modern expansionist project and fossil fuels. So the highway in Montreal crosses low-income neighborhoods in Saint-Michel in Montreal East, and while respiratory disease caused by atmospheric pollution yield a 9-year difference between, in terms of expectancy, in terms of the west end of the island and the east end of the island, atmospheric toxicity asks pressing questions about the accessibility to a healthy urban environment. So this research leads us to conduct fieldwork in different air quality monitoring stations where we look at different instruments. Also to develop DIY sensing kits that are tools to walk and navigate the city. Okay. And all this fieldwork brings us to develop different speculative technique and soft membranes to track, filter, and transform atmospheric processes. Okay. For instance, we're developing custom methods for biofiltering using Abaca filters. And this experimentation led us in the last year in a residency at Père de Signal in the Myland, to experiment with the different components of the piece. I will just play 30 seconds of it because time is limited. So these are the objects that capture air quality data. These are images of the urban environment captured by the different sensing kits. And here is a filtration process in an indoor installation where air circulates and is filtered across different biomaterials and also bio-inspired materials. So this brings me to discuss another project, Membrane en Action, which experiments with the concept of membrane and reactive flexible objects inspired by living system. Basically, the research looks at how the concept of membrane fosters new forms of interaction between living systems, built environments, and humans. And fossilization is the first outcome of this project. It's a large bioplastic membrane that floats above the ground like a film roll. The color is made out of food waste, onions to be more precise, and on the membrane are imprinted different obsolete electronic devices. What's most interesting with this piece is that it recaptures the heat waste and residual energy of the building of the Pompidou Center. So we have sensors that are installed in the museum, and that transforms all these residues, these energy residues, into electricity to power the piece. Different project with research labs at McGill and Concordia involve the creation of smart materials. A project we have with McGill is about the co-creation of graphene oxide structures, responsive graphene oxide. So graphene basically is a carbon-based nanomaterial that's derived from the oxidation of graphite. And through this project, we work with materials engineers and chemical engineers to look at how can materials become alive and respond to different stimulations, and how can those materials inform more sustainable ways of living and being on this planet. Okay. So we develop arts and science residencies where students work in different research labs to co-develop materials, but also art objects. The goal is also to reflect on different methodologies and how scientists can be informed by art methods and vice versa. Okay. Another project we have at the crossroad of biodesign, digital arts, and architecture and aerospace engineering is the design of responsive biomembranes that respond to magnetic field. So these membranes are used in aerospace and different aircraft pilot cabin. They're usually made out of silicone. It's pretty unsustainable. So we're looking at ways to develop more sustainable applications of this material, but also to see how these materials that are dedicated to industrial application can translate in the arts to foster new modes of engagement with the installation processes. And finally, I will end with this one, which is not related to materiality, but in an extended way. Is it possible to have sound?
Can you turn up the room sound a bit?
Alice, you'd have to turn up your laptop a tiny bit for us to hear it.
explain it briefly. Basically, Outer Space in the City is a project at the intersection of media studies and communication, as well as design and urbanism. And basically, we look at how telecommunication infrastructures that are in the geo are not only out of sight, but out of reach, and how to create new inclusive form of citizenship by reappropriating those technologies. And I'll end with an image of our last exhibition at the Rotterdam Architecture Biennial, presented in September, I think. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alice. Really appreciate that. Clappity, clappity. Awesome, fascinating. So we'll get to unpack all of that delicious material in just a minute, but for now I want to introduce our next fabulous artist, Rasa Smite. Rasa is an artist, researcher, and cultural innovator working at the intersection of art, science, and emerging media since the mid-90s. She is the co-founder of RIXC Art and Science Center in Riga, Latvia. She is actively lecturing in various universities. Currently, she's a professor in Liepāja University's New Media Art program and a visiting lecturer at ACT at MIT Boston. She's the author of the books Creative Networks, In the Rearview Mirror of Eastern European History, published by Amsterdam Institute for Network Culture, 2012, and Talk to Me, Exploring Human-Plant Communication, published by RIXC 2014. She is also the author of numerous articles and co-editor of the Acoustic Space series issues. She has co-curated large-scale exhibitions of Waves in Riga 2006, Dortmund 2008, together with Armin Medoš and Inke Arns, and Fields in Riga 2014, together with Rasa Smite and Armin Medoš, as well as more recent exhibitions like Transformative Ecologies, Mons in Riga 2015, and Data Drift, Riga 2015, together with Rasa Smite and Lev Manovich. Rasa Smite has also been active in building Baltic-Nordic and European collaboration platforms. She has co-founded Renewable Network 2009 and Renewable Futures, Traveling Art and Science Conference Series. She is in 2015. She is lecturing extensively on creative networks and sustainability, ecology, and contemporary media art, contemporaneity, and networked/post-media art. So take it away, Rasa. Thank you.
I'm really happy to be in this fourth space. It looks amazing. It's beautifully set up. It's very convenient, and it's great to see all people here and also online. Thank you, Megan, very much for inviting me for this Fire and Light program. And you already was reading so much about me, so I will be more like focusing on about introducing mainly kind of rather a notion which has been very guiding through all my research creation work and also all different other activities. So basically well, it's a bit similar like you said. So I'm very much also have been always interested in how to sense the invisible worlds, and this already we have been even doing together with my partner Raitis, with whom we work as artist duo, and also co-founded RIXC. So for quite a big while, even before we started to work with the nature. So because we were interested also what kind of the technologies can help us to reveal, to experience and visualize all what we don't see. And so for quite a long time, we also been so with the advent of the internet, so we also have been always interested in these different communication technologies, like also radio waves, and later it was internet, and later it was even not only internet, but with the internet, so this is how we started actually. So it was exactly mid-90s. So it was the time when finally the Soviet Union was broke down and Latvia became independent, and finally we very traditionally trained young artists in visual art. We could finally, through new media, internet, could access and reach out and to meet other people there in a Western country, which was not possible before. And so we so quickly actually developed ourselves into the very heart of this new media culture that we even received in 1998 a prize Ars Electronica for Exchange Net Radio Art Network project, which surprised also very much us. But simply this was such an interesting period. It was so big inspiration using the sound as a medium for exploring this new like internet space, cyberspace. Yeah, so even our background was visuals. So, but later with some commercialization of the internet. So in the turn of century, coming a mobile paradigm. So we didn't stop. We continued also search even for more other media. So how we could sense our surroundings. So we also were like kind of revealing these old technologies like urban radio telescope in Latvia. We organized a legendary symposium in 2001 because it was for the first time when we brought together about 30 radio artists, amateurs, and astronomers in this facility, which was abandoned by the Soviet army, by Russian army when of occupation, which left Latvia in 1994. And in this international group, it was before we joined the EU, but it was very, very international. So this is the beginnings of the internet, these first 5 years or even almost a decade. So because there were also even people from New Zealand, from Australia, from Canada. So we could also, I think, Blackfoot Indians from Calgary radio and Cree Indians coming. So it was such an amazing place because we ourselves here in Latvia, we felt like indigenous people who finally, you know, have got this independence. So this was, and also all these sensitive mediums such as sound, such as these radio waves seemed something which can better than other mediums, better than visuals, because those times they were very limited, especially in the internet and even on the computer side. So I think they were the best who opened up this imagination and helped us to communicate. So even now, like 20 years ago, 20 years later, we came back and we also now work on a RT32, this urban telescope revisited project and deep sensing. So we are now visualizing these different data, which are these days this telescope receiving, and trying to compare them with also meteorological data. So that's about more like future project. But yeah, so it was about 2008 with this energy crisis. So in 2009, when we started to really take technologies and go out to the nature. So, so this next question was how non-humans sense the environment. So we were so interested in exploring these so-called microbial fuel cells on battery, the project. So we installed also the same microbial fuel cells in a botanic garden in Latvian University in Riga. So we were also discussing with scientists, what is the future of these renewables? So okay, we know solar and winds, but there are also some other alternative technologies. Of course, they produce very, very little power, and they need a lot of engineering work to be more efficient. But still, they were our first step, how we tried to really work together with bacteria, trying to understand if they need or not these electrons which they were releasing due to fermentation process, so which we could collect, because we are thinking it's free electrons they don't need. So they're having discussions, but maybe the ecosystem need them, even if they don't use, but they are part of the ecosystem. So these were the projects which brought us closer also to our next project, so more recent, which is acoustic atmospheric forest. Because so we start to understand that how this world, we sometimes even don't felt there is a bit limitation even in our imagination, because this is definitely that plants feel and sense the world differently. And so our project Atmospheric Forest was a three-year collaboration with climate scientists from Switzerland. So where we try to work closely together and understand the topics they research and also what is their perspective. So we created this virtual reality environment. Yeah, because for us, kind of, we think that the forests are there, they produce oxygen, but they are not only oxygen producers, they overall are breathing themselves, and even sometimes, either it's night or other conditions, they are even emitting CO2 back a little bit into the atmosphere, so which means they really literally are even also breathing, yeah, not only releasing different emissions. So we collected a lot of data. We scanned the atmospheric, not atmospheric, but the forest, the structure, and tried to visualize these processes. So at the end, so there is a virtual reality installation, which currently is exhibited also in Toronto, and which consists of these two layers. So one was this LiDAR scanned structure of the forest, and on top of it, we were visualizing these dynamic processes. Yeah, so these are, for example, like just pure visualizations of soil humidity, of the resin generation in tree trunks, of the monoterpene emissions and air humidity. So they're very like clear data sets, so which we decided to choose. Okay, so I'm just going closer. So yeah, all type of methods. Okay, just will leave a little bit. So where is this? Okay, it doesn't go back. Never mind. I can explain. So yeah. So I did many field trips, of course, because I want to experience myself. So then these discussions and interviews with the scientists again. So and also editing them and sharing them, and they became a part of artwork also in installation, so that also audience can listen if they are interested in them. But there was also this another part which for me seemed very important, and this was this tangible part. So how these invisible processes, these so-called volatile emissions, and also scientists just say me, this is the same molecular formula, but I'm not chemist. I don't understand. So what it is, I need to experience. I'm artist. So I started to collect these resins, because they are those who are responsible for this beautiful smell, fragrancy of the pine tree forests. And so I started to collect them. I started to observe also the trees, how they produce them, because not all trees, for some reason, produce them. And so I started to experiment, just finding simple do-it-yourself recipes or methods, how to transform them into californium and how to make some drops of the turpentine. So that's a californium sculpture of whole kind of this artifacts of this forest where I did this research. Yeah, and I later also for last year there was an Esch. It was European Capital of Culture in Luxembourg, and also in Basel later the exhibition. So during the opening, I made these performances. I already squeezed my 5-hour experiment, which I did first in my countryside. I already now put it into about like 15-20 minutes of experiment where I was burning this, some woods and melting because it's very, very hot. So because an electric it's not enough heat. And then I was also pouring cold water on a tube with a hot, there's a hot steam coming from these melting resins. And so I was giving around for people to experience this drops of turpentine. Yeah. Okay, but I'm almost done. So, okay, it's more time for just saying, so yeah, currently until even 13th of May, this exhibition in Okadu Gallery, an on-site gallery, and then 199 Richmond Street. Yeah,
with Jane.
Curated by Jane Tingley. Yeah, so there are really interesting artworks altogether, about almost 10 artworks. They kind of each complement each other. So, but this our virtual reality experience is in 17 minutes long, so with different 5 scenes, so with all these visualizations and those animated volatile emissions. And we also publish the books, which already Megan mentioned. The most recent one is Green Revisited, which is our COVID time publication, because we always somehow, during these 3 years, maybe managed to make big exhibitions in Riga, and they got closed, but at least 1 month they were open. So, and so these beautiful exhibitions from starting green or ungreening the greenness, yeah. So how to go beyond this notion of green and really to understand more in depth. So then also eco data, and the most recent was post-sensorium. So all these like catalogs, texts of the conferences, so these are included in this most recent publication. Yeah. So here is a bit overview. So yeah, somehow it has happened that what we do is not always artistic practice only, because I think we have it's not enough. Yeah, we need much more people. So we organize also conferences and festivals, and we curate exhibitions with our ICSIS Center. And we always publish basically everything since the 1997-8 first publications is later also being published. Okay, so there's someone.
Thank you, Paldies, Rasa. Fabulous. Thanks so much for that overview of your work. So I kind of want to jump on something that you mentioned even at the start, which is that both of you are interested in making the invisible visible, but that you also articulated an investment in a kind of animism or vibrant materiality, where you're thinking of material as being alive, or recognizing the liveness in live entities that we might be culturally cut off from in a kind of colonialist sense. But like, I'm curious as to how that particular view of material as alive shapes your creative practices, either whether you're making your own work or supporting the work of others.
Thanks. Well, I think that this question is manifold, but perhaps starting with the question of like material liveliness or material agency, in terms of practice, it's always, and I think it informs also probably the way I teach, the way I do research with my group, the way things unfold in the lab. It always has to do with amplifying what's there. So once you consider something, I would say, vibrant or alive or able to perform in certain specific parameters, or able to interact with certain instruments and produce reactions, well, it becomes a kind of a research path about amplifying those kind of micro behaviors. So it's probably a process of zooming in and trying to, I don't want to use the word extract because that goes a little bit against what I'm trying to put, but like I would say to amplify and zoom in the existing. So that's one thing. And in terms of invisibility, that's an interesting one, because I think that, and Rasa also have this practice around data, and it asks question about what do you quantify, what do you measure, and what those numbers mean. So when you work with material, or at least on my end with my team about materializing the invisible, these are very analog processes. Like, I mean, data is very secondary in the whole process. And say in the air filtration project, we devised this kind of citizen sensing kit and we realized while using that kit that we were like not only and also working with scientists at the City of Montreal in environmental science, that this data was kind of useless first on the scientific perspective, and it's said because the sensors are too unstable, but that really it was just a proxy to go in the city and sense with your whole body instead. So, and it's interesting because architect Nerea Calvillo speaks about attunement with sites and non-humans and more than humans. So I think that for me, capturing data and trying to make the invisible visible is really about attuning to different forms of agencies in the built environment.
Okay, so but as I said, so there have been very different also periods in how we perceive this invisible. So I said for the beginning, being traditionally trained as a visual artist, so like even internet seemed visible enough for me. So just even imagining the physical infrastructure seemed in the beginning so inspiring for a couple of years, you know. So, but later this interest, so it really just transformed into, yeah, also this life that how actually we little know about around us, and also the knowledge which we kind of think we get in school. Maybe there are good schools who can explain how physics in a way that, but we didn't. I never have been going, because I was going in quite a not very nice, just a Soviet school. So usually the books, there were many books which we received in 1st of September, we get back in May, even not open, because they were so boring, you know, like geography of I don't know, of Soviet economy or something, you know. So they're totally boring. I'm not sure. Maybe you have interesting teachers and interesting books, But then you can really become so amazed, because even this, I imagine the lectures of physics, when you could listen this, what Watson in Boston did in the end of the 19th century, to the ionosphere bouncing, or making like artist Joyce Hinterdix in Australia. So she makes interesting children workshops when they are drawing with a pencil, with the graphite pencil. They're making antennas, and then they play with them. So there are different other conductive materials as well, which are at home. Yeah, of course, kitchen labs or something. Yeah, I think, but I think this experience, I really think is something where what artists can bring, what artists can do, and that this is probably why more fundamental scientists have started to accept that artists are joining the research field, because they realize that there are many, because our society is too complex these days, that there is no any single field which can explain the process, neither social nor natural.
So to speak to that, how, because both of you exist in like both that kind of institutional research creation world and in kind of a more a greater vocabulary of contemporary art, which maybe doesn't point towards more those institutional frameworks. And I'm curious to hear more about how do you, when you're doing these interdisciplinary collaborations, I'm coming from America, so I want to be like, articulate your value as artists, because that's an urgent concern in the States, but maybe that's not a concern where you're coming from. Maybe it's just more like, how do you engage with, how do you talk in these interdisciplinary collaborations? How do you ensure that you stay on the same page? How do you guide scientists through your own perspective and process, and vice versa? Yeah, just to start, like, what is your approach to these interdisciplinary collaborations?
We're really even in the rotating speech. Well, I mean, I think that's, first, it always depends on the humans, and it always depends on the problematic and the interest. And of course, like, I think that I've been in situation whereas and it's no one's fault. I mean, it just happens because you need to get to know each other. But slippage such as, like, say, artists romanticizing science, or vice versa, scientists instrumentalizing art as a form of way to raise awareness, or to make make a point about the public education of science. These slippages exist, but there are also some really interesting, productive collaborations and platforms and forms of negotiations. And I think to me, it's always been about, and Rasa mentioned it, about, well, no one has the answer in its own discipline anyway, and even together we probably don't have the answer, but we can search together. And the most productive collaboration to me have always been about creating this kind of third party object, where it's not about creating an art object necessarily, or not creating a science application, but it's looking to this kind of, I would say, left field trajectory where something else can emerge. So to me, this is where it's the most, I would say, promising. And right now, say at the BioLab, we work with the Biointerface Lab at McGill, and we developed those responsive graphene objects and structures that I showed you. And we really tried to create this kind of even platform and methodology where 1 week we go in the chemistry and material science lab, the other week they come at Concordia and we look at each other's work. And it needs to be iterative and back and forth, because these are two different worlds. And even though it's very similar in terms of heuristic and experimentation, at least materials engineering and biodesign, it's very trial and error. There are some difference in terms of methods and protocol, but to me, this is what's really, really interesting. How do you share methods? How do you share risk? How do you share discoveries? So I think it's negotiable, but you have to work under certain parameters, at least in my right now, like within the current context of working within an institution. And of course, after that, all those products of arts and science research creation, as you said, they travel outside the institution to our different galleries, to different public workshops, public events, interventions. And I mean, they take on another dimension, which, because they address not only to the people in the lab, but to wider audiences. So it's always about, okay, how do you create something and research something, but also after that, try to mediate it toward broader publics. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not sure about this third way because we were also very much for a long time trying to search for it. And then we realized, and also because the language, how scientists speak and how artists, and even if you invite to the conference these scientists who work in a similar topic, let's say renewable energy or climate or something. So there are still so different ways how this is happening. So, and yeah, because with the scientists, sometimes they are either too general or immediately too specific. Yeah. So if there could be this third way, I just would love it. So if somebody could find it, because I think they could actually kind of really fill each other's, some of these gaps. But when I was saying about this third way, so we were, for example, especially with bacteria battery, so we were organizing many workshops. It nearly became like a field of workshopology, So there are some PhD works actually writing about workshopology. When artists start to make sharing this knowledge through their workshops. But we did it so many times in so many festivals and so many countries and conditions, like with students, with contemporary arts, summer schools or work. But always there was this one moment when finally these these bacteria cells are made, and you put you start to measure electricity, and you see there is some voltage coming. You should see this face into the people's this smile into people's faces, because they are so happy. Even if we don't know, we don't understand, we just talk about bacteria, we go together to pick up the mud, then we put together into these two jars, and trying to connect and get out some electricity. But we should be very careful. We should ask them if they really are there, if they are okay, because they live in the very, very stinky black mud, which is really, so then they are the best. If it's too fresh, like soil, it's too much oxygen, they don't live there so well. You need to process them. You probably know, you work with waste. So these bacteria live everywhere, even in our blood. And they release these free electrons. But otherwise, I think it's also not bad, actually, to be quite clear with scientists and to say, okay, we can work for some time together, and you will get your paper out, and we will publish your paper, but we will have artwork, which will go to exhibitions. So how we credit each other, this in the beginning is important, whether it's research, but later actually it's not anymore. Neither artists care about being in scientific publication mentioned nor other way around.
But you publish Acoustic Space, this journal that comes out of RIXI, and I know you have an extensive publication record as well. So I'm curious as to, especially when we're thinking about scientific versus research creation publication, or artists participating within a research publication paradigm, how there's also a lot of debate in the field as to what constitutes appropriate artistic research, or a vital research question for artistic research. And I'm curious as to for both of you, what is the value of scholarly publication for artists, and how do you approach that in your own practices and the support of other practices?
Oh, that's a really good question. But I think that maybe the debate should not be about whether or not X or Y research question is valid or research approach is valid, but I think the value of publishing as artists, as makers, and as doers is also to have the chance to explain or to communicate how things in the making happen. Because of course, we can lean on 10,000 theories if we want, but what's really promising to me and probably the richest is also to build from the ground up and not to be afraid of valuing those making processes and what happens in the lab and what happens in the studio and what happens in this specific type of collaboration or this other specific type of collaboration. So I think we have to go into the texture of things to be relevant, and this is where it's interesting. And there's also a gap in terms of literature. If I think about my work with my students, it's sometimes, you know, it's easy to speak about methods and to look at the definition of a method, but who and how was that implemented? There's not so much, you know, and there are 10,000 methods, so it's really hard. So all that to say that these are the chances to produce exemplary case studies of how things are done. So I think, yes, it's valuable.
Yeah, I think for artists, this research process and also to start writing about it, it is quite, and get published, is quite important. That just, I think that should be clearly that art, I like this so-called practice. There are many definitions, but practice-led is what I like the best. So it's basically my research, when I do research, should be constantly reflected. So it's basically, I am a reflective practitioner. And then I do what you just said, then I reflect and then I write. By the way, this writing, I think, is quite an important thing because, this myth that artists are just putting somehow these emotions into their art piece. That's even funny, you know. It would be like putting sensors everywhere and saying that they do something. They don't do anything.
I don't have emotions.
Yeah, no. No. Yeah, but this is exactly. But when artists are explaining how they do all this process, how they think through, how they reflect also this world they perceive. Yeah, how they put different knowledge together and how this transforms into first experiments and how it comes together and again how next layer of knowledge comes when you continue working with the scientists or with data, how to select them, what to do aesthetically. You just follow up constantly. So this beautiful point. When I first saw the point cloud images in these LiDAR scanners in this Swiss Institute for Climate and Forest Research, I was thinking, oh my God, there is nothing anymore to do for artists because these images are so beautiful. Because you have seen sometimes science images, they're so beautiful already. But of course, it's not really true because, and this was especially like, you know, like encouraging me really to think, what is this, what artists can bring, you know. How I was searching for this missing link, which is connecting Earth's ecosystem with the atmosphere. You know, I was thinking many ideas of the signals, of ionosphere, everything, while finally this atmospheric chemistry was really this thing which I found in atmospheric forest. And when I describe it, and recently I was invited also for one climate. It was already climate finance conference to give a workshop and scientific presentation. I prepared really scientific one. So explaining all these processes. Yeah. Then I think it's somehow they completely different. Also start to look at the artwork. So how it's built.
Yeah. So it sounds like that reflection is like key to considerations of sustainability for you, and part of the artist's role in that dialogues around sustainability and climate change. No? Yeah,
totally. And when I think about Rasa's work, you know, the work with the forest is absolutely fabulous in the sense that I was reading about the Amazon's forest, I don't know, a few days ago, and an article came out about how it's soon not to be a carbon sink anymore, but like a forest that will produce carbon because of the deforestation, but also how the quality of the forest is impacted itself by climate change. And I mean, for most of us, it's so remote, but like the Amazon is like one of the biggest planetary common. And I think that, say, you spoke about like LiDAR photography, which is like super beautiful, by the way, it's amazing. But how do you frame this information, and how do you bring it to the public, and how do you create this kind of aesthetic, critical, material experience? I think it's key, and it's not only about saying about being like involving moral and judgment and saying, okay, something's bad happening, but no, but rather like how can you speculate what could be instead of what is right now in those catastrophic times. So I think there is something really powerful about research creation and art in general, and I think more and more we see research creation that points outward versus what we had a few decades ago about research creation looking at its own, I would say, framework. So I think it's key, and it's the power of it's not only about like generating emotion, but also like, yes, there are affects, but like you can engage with public, you can create workshops. I would say the outputs and the outcomes of research creation can travel and transform according to the settings and the audiences. And I think the forest work is particularly powerful in that matter.
So for me, there's a lot of both of your practices that is deeply entangled with performance, both in how you engage with just the process in general, but also the recognition of the human presence in dialogue with non-human entities, but also framing materials and non-humans as and their processes as like kind of performers in the artworks. But I'm wondering if you feel, and it's okay if you don't, if you feel that performance is a relevant framework or consideration for your work, and why or why not.
I don't know. I've been
fair, legit, 100%.
No, but I've been wearing those terms because some speak about collaboration with non-humans or more than humans, but is it really collaboration? I mean, we haven't asked for anything, so it's just like
you have collaboration without consent.
That's it first, yeah. And so to me, this is a problematic term, but performative framework is interesting because it also speaks about the agency of not only living material, but technological one. If we think about scientific instruments and how they perform in different contexts, or how they evolve or transform across artistic contexts, I think it's probably a more productive framework than, say, collaboration.
No, for me, I think it was interesting, like to switch from this workshops to performance, because I was also thinking I definitely wanted to share this, being together with somebody, experimenting, and then either it's building these batteries or like melting resin and getting this turpentine through distillation process. So, but I couldn't figure out how I can make this workshop. So I thought maybe it would be very interesting to try to set up as a performance, this experiment. Mm-hmm. So it's still all these are experiments, and they require this environment. So where we are together. So either it's like a collaborative performance, mm-hmm. or it's a workshop. So that's not like already like data visualization or atmospheric forest VR, mm-hmm. part. Yeah. So that's clearly artwork which even can be set up in right context, and it's there, so, and can be experienced. But these are different type of experience. It's about live material. Mm-hmm. It's tangible, how you experience invisible, by making it tangible.
Yeah.
So we have a few minutes before I want to turn to the audience for potential questions, but I'm wondering if you had any final thoughts or reflections that came up in this exchange, or points about your work you think it's important to articulate.
Well, I had one question, but maybe it's been discussed between the lines. Well, one question was about for Rasa, your book about greening differently. I'd like to hear more on this question of greenwashing, because we speak a lot about artists and practitioners having the ability to raise awareness and all that stuff, but how does that operate in practice? It's not necessarily the case, and is it aligned with the intention of the practitioner, the researcher, or the artist? I don't know. So I'd like to hear you about this idea of greenwashing and techno-washing within the context of art practices.
Yeah, well, the green topic has been, we really developed it in a very interesting show, the large exhibition in Riga, in Latvian National Arts Museum, just in summer before COVID. So it was July, August, September 2019. So we exhibited about 20 artworks. So it's again, so research creation, but through this time for curating the exhibitions of other works. And this we did together with Rasa Smite and also with Jens Hauser, bioart curator, so who is also working on this green topic. So he brought interesting, really works together. Some of them were like Adam Brown from Michigan University. So he did a performance about poisonous green, for example. All this myth about green and how people in the 17th, 18th century were covering all the walls with the wallpaper, which was made from the very poisonous green color, because they used arson in older times. It was difficult to get the green color, and if you added this very bad poison like arson, and also in a later centuries, 18th, also they used in the textile industry. So basically all these beautiful also clothes of women which were in green color sometimes contained this green. So that was one. The other one, of course, is the beautiful, those green which are like when also in the United States, for example, when they do this, when they did in the 70s, these nuclear tests, and then the sand is melting, and then you have these beautiful green, like reflections of the uranium glass. Yeah, or uranium glass is used in some lights. So we intentionally try to take from this like a poisonous angle to also like artist Jan Peter Zontag who was experimenting with this last beam of the sun, as Jules Verne has been describing in his books, so that the last beam, when sun goes beyond the horizon, is a green color. So he was really trying to use different technologies of the lights to create this green color through the lights, yeah, and so on. So basically, and then the green, for example, artist Eva Maria Lopez, she made a beautiful series of football games. So she was walking through Karlsruhe city and taking photos of windows when some particular football games were taking place. And so one photo is a green window because of the grass. So she was calling, yeah, it's like Germany against Portuguese, for example. So she had whole series like this. Or also other way around. So she also did a work about like pesticide companies who are using this green as their main, like that. So we actually like really found very, very interesting examples how artists are reinterpreting this green, yeah, which is not just working with nature, but also different other ways. So going really beyond.
Reflecting on that same question, do you feel like there's aspects of your practice that touch on similar themes, where like green is not this romantic, pure notion, but something that is weaponizable or potentially toxic as well?
Well, no, I'm not necessarily with the color green, but what Rasa just mentioned made me think about this question of contamination also as a form of collaboration, and like the idea of like embracing the dirtiness of materiality and sometimes its toxic aspect also as part of the process. I remember, for example, and it speaks about also how art institutions are not necessarily ready or willing to open up to these kinds of practices. For example, the membrane we did for the Pompidou Center, it was living. So basically, it's bioplastic. It's evolving according to the interferences with its environment. It molds, it rots, it changes colors, it changes texture. But however, even if it was a show about the living, we were asked to devise this whole plan so the piece would not change within the whole duration of the exhibition, and how the infrastructure was not even willing to let us like bring water on site, or I mean, there is a big clash about like how things change, how things can look toxic, and what they are in reality for institutions.
So essentially, to exhibit that work was to incite its death on some level.
No, but that was to create those kind of recipes that would say make sure that like the bioplastic would not rot, would not change, that it would be completely aseptisé. I don't know how to say in English, but like with no molds, with no microbes, with no nothing. So it's also a way to cut this piece off. It's the environment that enabled it and produced it. So it was interesting in terms of tension, because we had a lot of fun doing this project, but we also had a lot of fun looking at the growing toxicity or growing contamination within those materials. And in the end, we couldn't let that happen. We couldn't envision that piece as something that would just like rot and disappear by itself, because it's decomposing. It had to be like fixed in time, and I think it's an interesting tension. But this idea of toxicity made me think about contamination as a form of collaboration.
Fascinating mission. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. I think we have time to transition on that kind of complex pivot to the audience and to questions either in the Zoom or in the live space. I think there's some comments in the chat, it looks like, or no, that's just you? Okay, cool. Thanks for all of your support. I see a hand up in the audience.
Hi there. Rasa, I'd love to go back to the performance that you mentioned briefly in your initial presentation, where you burned the fragrant materials, the resin, and so on. I happen to know that a lot of the people who are here in the room are theater students and theater practitioners. I'm wondering if you could speak to your choice to show that particular work as a performance, what you think performance as opposed to exhibition, publication, other kinds of workshopping, other kinds of experimentation does in relationship to the kind of work you do more broadly, and particularly your choice to make that piece a performance.
Yes, actually the COVID a little bit stopped, because I did already this experiment in 2000, summer of 2019 and 2019, yes. So first of all, I said I wanted to transform either into workshop, because I definitely wanted to share this, my excitement. You should also see how happy I am when finally this experiment works, because I had no clue if I really will get this turpentine out. So that's why it's called experiment, because experiments may fail. It's not that they always have to be successful. So, but I did it and it was successful, and I wanted to, so here I was pouring this cold water into hot tube, doing this, experiencing this simple distillation. How to turn, and for me, it was, I'm artist, so a bit shy to be on a stage, so to say. So, and I really, but I thought that there is a potential for the performance. I definitely should do, and then I did it, and it looked like even more like I expected, so I of course, not everything was, I had to also a little bit to add some extra turpentine or something, to it, so I could give around this smell. But I was thinking that all those artifacts just to bring for people, like when burning the woods, or really giving around, and so that they can smell this resin. And then I was melting them into this, and also, I somehow thought, well, of course I would be happy to be together with some performance supervisor, because, but you're right. I had to think what I will wear, Okay, my hat, so that's I usually have. Okay, that's easy. So then shall I wear this or that, so it's not easy for an artist who is usually completely deeply working inside of their mind, and making something outside, and then also even putting in exhibition. And some artists are so emotionally, already of this, like like shocked of this emotion. They don't even show up never for their own exhibitions sometimes. Yeah. So my work is there out in the show. I don't show up. But yeah, I'm a person who like communication since all the times, and I like people. I like to be with them together. Yeah, so that's why I'm just totally for any interdisciplinary skills which can be exchanged. Yeah, like artists should learn a bit performance and then yeah. So yeah, it's difficult for me, but I would be happy for some supervising or advice. You should.
Thank you. Other questions, either in the audience or in the chat? Yeah, we have a hand up over there.
Hi. Hi. I felt like in both cases there were so many interesting parts of the process, and I wondered how much the collaboration is the artwork or the object is the artwork for you. And I'm being really broad with that. It's not a real or, but I thought there's something quite rich in these collaborations across disciplines that also makes me think that that is the artwork. So I wondered if that was how you approach it.
Want to try that one out?
Yes.
Look toward
I
question.
can try that one. That's a super interesting question. I wouldn't say that the collaboration is the project, but definitely for me it takes it has more importance as different projects evolve. You realize how rich and fruitful it is, and how designing the collaboration is actually as interesting as designing a material object or an event or something like that. So I think maybe they go hand in hand together, and I think they probably serve different purposes also. Like how do you I would say the material outcomes of the research we do exist within different frameworks and touches different audiences and publics than the collaboration itself, which remain I would say intimate as a certain level until you publish it or you write about it or you create a film about it or something like that. So I would say that it's probably extremely interesting in terms of discovering different team procedures, different protocols, is that like devising arts and science protocols, and it's purely exciting. But I wouldn't say it is. I would say it parallels the object. Yeah. So that would be my humble answer to your question. Yeah.
Rasa?
Yeah, so I think this is about the searching for the third, like part, which I think is so crucial. And but as it didn't work out, at least in my practice, I now have maybe another idea how we could work together. So this could be rather like a project which are multidisciplinary or pluridisciplinary, where everybody individually still can work on their outputs, because different fields have different these outputs. But if there could be like really like this, clearly that we work on one, at least a larger context, not on very specific topic, but on specific topic individually, yes, but on some larger context. Because these days, I think it's so difficult. I don't know, also these scientists with whom I work together in Swiss Alps, they are saying that that for 20 years they have been observing this Finnwald forest, which, because it's really suffering from clearly from climate change, it's dying out. So, but they never before, just very, very recent few years, they never before collaborated between the different disciplines and different researches. So each, somebody was measuring how they are shrinking, somebody was measuring the weather conditions or how the plants are growing, or yeah, so, and this is only now they start to actually start to work on research questions for the ecosystem research, what it could be. Yeah, and why not artists there also joining in?
Thank you. We have a hand up.
I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit more about the process of having such a broad collaborative practice, and then taking that and then taking like a research creation thing and then like putting that into like a shareable, exhibitable, performable format for like an audience. I'm just really curious about what that process is like.
So starting from a concept and getting it to an exhibitable, publicly presentable form.
Yes.
Well, it's interesting because it touched base your question a little bit, the importance of collaboration. In my case, it's I would say that, you know, probably before being a professor, I had an independent practice. Now I have a collective practice, and I realized that's something that is extremely important to me. And I mean, I don't miss my individual practice. Actually, I realized that what I like the most probably about being a prof is to create those social ecologies where people can work together. And a good example is the project with about the air filtration. We're a big group. I think we're 7 working on that project. So how do you work with 7 people, and how do you create something cohesive, quote unquote, because we don't know yet if it's going to be cohesive. But I mean, how do we work together with different expertise, different timelines, different timescales? Like, you know, beyond concepts and talking and exchanging ideas, there's a lot of logistics involved in that. And for some reason, it's like you know, it's a little bit like the material agency that informed the collaboration and or vice versa, but we had no choice to develop a piece that's completely modular and that has to be worked individually and collectively at the same time. So basically the piece is developed with different modules that assemble in any direction and that can be reconfigured in any shape. But every module can be a kind of test bed where, like, say, one student researcher in the team can go home with it, experiment, bring it back in the big piece, and then we test it in relation to the others. So it demands the development of a kind of collaborative apparatus, I would say, that, well, in this case, it really informed the piece itself. And is the piece, say, formatted for an exhibition? I don't know yet, but what is formatted anyway, and when does the process end? Versus, I don't see the exhibition as a kind of closure or sealing of a research process, but rather an opening up and just like a moment that you crystallize in time, and then you bring the whole thing back to the lab or the studio and you keep working on it anyway. So yeah, that would be my answer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting experience. Yeah, very, very, really. I think there is a potential, seems, yeah, for this collaborative. Yeah, that just a little bit. What is always a bit difficult is to bridge the knowledge created within academia walls to the real world of you know, art museums or theaters. I think this is quite a huge gap, and it doesn't help that research is now recognized in a higher level, like a PhD. So no, it's rather way. Not really doesn't help. It doesn't make this gap smaller. But what definitely helps, I think, is one of these methods which I prefer the most, or is experiential learning. So I would always start, even if you don't have idea, but you have a notion, yeah, or you have a task by your teacher, for example, yeah. So just go and experience something, anything. So this is something where your next will come. So I had this very unique, really like special experience when I was invited to be a part of Eco Data, Eco Media, Eco Aesthetics project in 2017, invited to work together with climate scientists. Of course, I didn't have even idea what I will be making. So that this, but I was invited as a researcher who has to work artistically and create potentially, even not really an artwork. Yeah, this was more like my own initiative, really, to make a finished artwork. Yeah, but this process and there I really learned that this is so important. You even better go in many field trips, as many as possible. But this is something where and then you continue this conversation. Of course, you read many books. Of course, because this is the only period where you can really go deeply into the topic. But this how it helps, and also because of field record of these field trips, I once went there and And I was thinking, and this is so silent forest. I did sound recordings, then just one fly and one bee all over the land, like 10 hours. So there is nothing really to record. It's so far, so quiet. It's a summer. Nothing is happening in this forest. And then, but I go next day and I meet this very enthusiastic young Finnish scientist who is visiting scientist. And she just starts to explain me all her experiments she does with all those recordings of volatile emissions. Yeah, so she shows me their super powerful computer, which is really nearly in real-time recording for whole growing season, the data in the laboratory, which is set up in a container there. You know, so I didn't expect this, but this was really. Then I thought, yes, okay, let it be chemistry, which connects, you know, like this atmosphere with the ecosystem and things like that. But there were some things I knew. They turned a little bit around, so I knew the technologies. I definitely wanted something immersive to be created. Either 360 I experimented, it didn't work out, but then I got the slider. And this was really perfect medium, so which then I later was choosing.
Thank you. I have another hand up over here. Oh, and one in the back.
Hi. So from what I understood was that both of your work, or both of you engage with work with awareness and viability or agency of your environment. So I wanted to know, how do you feel that this research experience now impacts your own personal embodied knowledge, if at all?
So how do you operate differently as humans because of your artistic practices? Put another way, yeah, you know? Yeah, no, that wasn't better, it was just different.
You want to answer?
No, I think such a good question.
Yeah.
I need a little bit to think how I feel about it. But yeah, no, really good question. I don't know how much you can change what you perceive. I don't know.
And well, there's probably, I would say, if I can make a kind of like not a super efficient comparison, but still a comparison. You know, climate change is so spread through time and such a long scale phenomena that like day to day, we cannot say that, okay, one storm is due to climate change. It's something that's felt through time. But I think that probably many things changes across practices, but it's not like you do one project and you have an epiphany, so it's really hard to measure. So that would be my answer, because I'm just like, what changed? Probably little mini incremental things and things in different directions, but what, when? Maybe with like in 10 years or 5 years, I can look at this membrane project and say, oh yes, this was foundational in this, but now it's just too close. I don't know what to say about that.
No, I've just added some layers again of experiencing all this complexity, because this for me seems maybe was most interesting. So whenever I work more like revealing so these trees are emitting this and that, and then and the more actually I feel not much closer, I would say, but rather distant, because I understand that I will never feel like them. You know, they really feel differently. But this even, you know, like being aware of that they feel differently, this also helps somehow to perceive this, those, non-humans with whom we work maybe better. So, yeah, unfortunately, I cannot give also more sensible answer.
I think those are lovely descriptions of like how rich and difficult that question is, in a good way, it seems.
Very good
So thank you for that. We had another question over here. And I'm not sure if there's questions in the chat or if that's just moderation, but.
Hello. I'd like to know who's your audience, and if you know precisely on why or how did you select them?
That's a good question.
I'm not sure you select your audience because there are so many slippages that it's really hard to predict sometimes. But you probably choose to disseminate your work in a specific setting, and sometimes one specific dissemination mode will bring to another mode. And at least the way I work in our practice is that, say, an installation it can be disseminated in X context, but then can be changed and iteratively modified in another context. So the same object or event or material can yield workshops with publics, exhibitions, talks. So to me, these are all kind of, I would say, implementation of the same thing. So, and I'm not sure I select audiences. Yeah, no, I don't think I select audiences. Yeah.
I think there are not really how artists can do that. I think it's more about like in context within which we are showing our work. Maybe these of course can be chosen at some point, not always, but sometimes we can choose. And how else? Okay, so one is exhibitions. Okay, that's one way how to show the work, but then the others are these like workshops I'm saying. So these are always for smaller groups, but more intimate environment, and there is more some collaboration better happening probably. So you get know to your audience. But yeah, actually, I still see and believe in potential of arts to go beyond also these audiences, like visitors of exhibition, and be a part of, why not, big climate forum or conference or these new other visions of sustainable economies, because there's definitely, I think actually the art should be part of it because of how it can communicate these topics or experiences, especially in nature, the complexity, the invisibles, and variety, and many other. So just aesthetic means and technologies.
I think it's hard because there's so many grants that say who's your target audience, and like we have to articulate that as artists. But I think you guys are both kind of describing like part of how the field functions is that you're channeling this work through outlets where it's about what audiences are connected to that particular outlet, and does that outlet then like feed into another outlet, and and that has to do with like structures of access and privilege and context as well. So it becomes a complicated question. Yeah, for sure. Other questions from the audience or virtually? From the live audience or the virtual audience? No. No. All right. Well, maybe that's a good point to end on then. So thank you so much, Alice and Rasa. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Rasa.
Thank you, Alice.
Really nice. Thank you, Megan.
Totally fascinating discussion. Really excited about the parallels and the overlaps, and hope that was useful and generative to all of the theater performance nerds and beyond in the audience. And just a reminder again to join us again on April 3rd for the last in this Fire and Light series with Margot Zaleta and Eldad Sabari, who's in the back. I'm sure I butchered your last name, but he'll be in conversation with Margot on April 3rd. So hope to see you then. Thank you guys so much. Have a good one.
All right, just a quick note to the folks on Zoom. Thanks so much for your applause and your participation there. We're going to close up that space. If you wanted to revisit this conversation, it's already available on Concordia University's Fourth Space YouTube page. So check it out, share it with your friends and colleagues. Thanks, everybody. Bye.